Founders on Earth History, Part 1. Received by Sal Rachel. Greetings, beloved creators. Today begins a very special series. Most of you reading this message have attended history courses in grammar school, secondary school, and college. This will be unlike any history course you've taken in your so-called traditional Earth schools. Today we will look at the true history of your Earth. This scribe has written a brief history of Earth in his book, but even that is incomplete. We will attempt to outline your planetary history in a broader stroke of the paintbrush, keeping in mind that time and space are illusory in nature, and any portrait of timelines is subject to distortion. The timeframes we give here are the rough equivalents to your current 3D timeline. However, as this channel and many others have recently indicated, time can be changed and modified by your own awareness. Therefore, history is not written in stone, but is an ongoing tapestry of events continually being rearranged and rewritten. All of time is like an infinitely large fabric, and each thread represents a probable or possible reality. The 3D world is a series of threads that are imprinted in the Akashic energy medium. Each event in 3D is an imprint, and this electrical impulse is recorded as having actually happened. Yet any event that has actually happened can be moved into another timeline, and you, beloveds, can jump from one timeline to another, both individually and collectively. Therefore, if you desire to change history, you can simply select another thread in the fabric and make that your new timeline. In your physics, you call experiments with this idea quantum entanglement. With this brief disclaimer, as you like to call it, we will begin. This universe you find yourselves in began about 20 billion years ago as a point of light within the mind of God. This point of light was contained within a greater point of light, which was contained within a greater point, etc., into infinity. There is an aspect of the Godhead that has always existed, and that expands and contracts an infinite number of times. All of life is continually expanding and contracting, much like that device you look through with the coloured glass, the kaleidoscope. During one of the expansion phases, approximately 4.5 billion years ago, your world you call Earth was formed out of primordial dust and gas. Like all newly formed worlds, it was mostly hydrogen and a few other gases, not containing the kind of life you know. Throughout this physical chemical process, the Godhead, in an expansion phase, differentiated itself into units of consciousness, which later became known as souls. These original souls, called the Founders, are what we represent to you. We were the original sparks of light that were showered out from the infinite source during this expansion. Our individuality began approximately 1 billion years ago, and we went forth to explore the creation. We found millions of planets in their early stages of development, including your world, and we remained in the form of sparks, although actually to you we look like large blue-white stars. Due to our relatively rarefied level of vibration compared to the vibratory states of these worlds, we were unable to experience life directly on any of these worlds, so we would simply overlight or hover above the atmosphere of these worlds and observe the chemical processes taking place. At some point in the distorted time-space continuum, we decided to embed a tiny part of ourselves into the evolving worlds in order to experience them more directly. To do this, we created a multitude of energy patterns, precursors to what you call the DNA molecule. You would call these precursors light packets of conscious energy. These light packets were able to descend in vibration down to what you would call the 9th or 10th density. At that point, we were able to create intricate configurations of light codes, which you now call DNA keys. These DNA keys were the actual building blocks of life as you know it. We then densified these keys down to what you call 7th density, the first level of the actual DNA codes. As 7th density beings, we were finally able to experience this expanding universe directly as inhabitants of evolving worlds. We scattered our seed throughout the universe, going to many regions of the ever-expanding galactic clusters. As the clusters differentiated further into individual galaxies, we began the process described above and incarnated into several regions of each galaxy. Your galaxy, the one you call the Milky Way, was seeded in several quadrants. Your quadrant began in what you call the Lyra Vega region. It is here that the 7th density forms were manifested through manipulating and permutating the DNA codes. It took us nearly 900 million years to perfect this process, and it is only within the last 100 million years that we were able to create life forms in all the densities down to 3rd density. The process of differentiation is difficult for most Earth souls to comprehend. The best analogy we can give is that of cellular division. Each cell that divides from a parent cell becomes an individual cell in its own right, just as powerful and creative as the parent cell, if not more so. Each 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D or 7D being that fragmented off from our parent cells, our 12th density core, became a sovereign being, or whole and complete soul, as it grew and evolved through time and space. At the same time, each fragment, as it becomes aware of its higher aspects, is able to align or connect with those higher aspects, and thereby remember what the state of undifferentiated source energy is like. In essence, each fragment of ourselves is intimately connected to our core, and our core is intimately connected to the Godhead, the undifferentiated infinite source. The process of descending into form is called devolution. An aspect of the Godhead, us, becomes more and more differentiated and extends itself outward into lower and lower densities, actually becoming more and more dense, until it reaches the level of simple existence. In other words, a part of ourselves extended outward all the way to the level of pure elemental awareness, or first energy. This is the density of what you call non-organic existence, the simplest manifestation of which is the hydrogen element. Once hydrogen is imbued with consciousness, the process of evolution begins. Of course, your scientists cannot measure the level of consciousness in first density because it is minute in comparison to 3rd density. However, your scientists have discovered what you call the quark, and you have a measurement that you call Planck's constant. These units are aspects of first density consciousness, and are the means to measure the forces behind quantum fluctuations. However, we realize we are speaking to a general audience through this medium, and will therefore refrain from a technical scientific discussion. Now we will discuss the beginnings of evolution on your planet, corresponding to the time period between 100 million and 10 million years ago. We are the founders, happy to help illuminate your path of awakening. We began a discourse on the true history of your planet, but we didn't get very far, only to the point where the humanoid form began propagating throughout the universe. This form you have come to know so well, with its arms, legs, torso, head, etc., was the result of genetic experimentation and research comprising a very long period of time, about 900 million of your Earth years. During that time, all manner of exotic life forms were created by permutating the DNA strands and structures. Most of the animal life you are familiar with was brought forth as a side effect of this research. Forgive us, but we are going to back up a bit. This is a vast subject to most of your peoples, and we do not want to leave anything out. Life exists in many forms, some of which you would not recognize if it were right in front of you. There are carbon-based life forms, silicon-based life forms, and even lithium-based life forms. These are sentient beings with at least a rudimentary understanding and awareness of their presence and the love of the Creator. All life began in the simplest of states. Even hydrogen has a level of awareness. The Creator, in the form of us, began experimenting with different life forms. We found we could take the rudimentary consciousness of a hydrogen atom or a heavier metallic element and permutate the atomic structure, thus creating new and varying forms of life. All life forms we created had a natural tendency to become more organized over time and more sophisticated, gradually growing in self-awareness. The natural evolution of life forms followed what you call the Darwinian evolutionary model. All of our experiments and the experiments of other groups like us were represented by mutations or periods punctuated with intense growth and alteration of form and structure. Your scientists do not understand why there are so many mutations and alterations in living organisms. We are offering an explanation. As life began evolving from first density up the various mineral and plant stages, there eventually came a level of sophistication and awareness known as the animal stage, wherein it became possible for the higher density souls to incarnate directly into the flesh and blood of these evolving life forms. This is the part that is hard to understand for most of you, but it is as if a tiny fragment of yourself, the animal consciousness, was reunited with the larger part of yourself, your 7D consciousness, to incarnate into an animal form. The tiny aspect, the consciousness of the animal, would have to merge with the larger aspect, the consciousness of the incarnating soul. The cosmic in-breath involves the merging and assimilating of soul fragments into larger and larger conglomerations of consciousness. Incarnation is one way this process is accomplished. The pinnacle of this evolutionary process is the humanoid form. This humanoid form you find yourselves embodying was originally designed to be capable of experiencing 7 different dimensions simultaneously. It had the capability to sit, stand, walk, run, leap, fly, and teleport itself from one place to another. All of these were considered valuable experiences of physicality and ether reality. For this body you inhabit was quasi-physical in the sense that it could be made translucent and fluid, or it could be as solid as you experience it now. This body was designed specifically to work with the gravitational and electromagnetic fields of evolving planets, and its density could be shifted at will from the 1st through 7th level. During the 900 million year period of experimentation, there were many strange and exotic forms walking upon your planet. You are familiar with some of them, including the dinosaurs. These DNA forms were created as byproducts of our research and the research of other groups who worked with us. There was a period known in your mythology as the Land of Pan. This civilization took place near the beginning of the 100 million year cycle, which is, incidentally, about 1/2 of a revolution of your sun around the central sun of your galaxy. During the time of Pan, or Pangaea as it is sometimes called, the DNA experimentation was still going on, and there were no safeguards built into the Earth laboratory. This meant that various life forms could interbreed and create other exotic blends and hybrids. You are perhaps familiar with the Pegasus and Centaur, and other creatures resembling a cross between horses and man, or horses and angels. There were many bizarre creatures roaming your world, all a product of genetic experimentation and interspecies breeding. Embedded within the genetic codes of every species was the infinite creator's plan of evolution, known as the inbreath of creation. The inbreath of creation issues forth the universal law of increasing intelligence and self-awareness. All life forms during the inbreath have a blueprint of ascension along the evolutionary spiral, and so as the bizarre life forms of Pan began to grow in awareness, they developed various levels of judgment and discernment through various mental and emotional faculties. They began to become aware of their creator, and they also began to become aware that they were spirits embedded in various physical and etheric forms. As sparks of the original, undifferentiated source energy, they felt a longing to return to that source. They began to realize that a part of that source had split off from the vastness of love and light and was going through this outer experience of embodiment. This is the allegorical reference to the tree of knowledge of good and evil in your religious teachings. These life forms were given a realm of creation in which to learn how to become gods in their own right. This realm is known as the fourth dimension, or the realm of mind and knowledge and imagination. Within the blueprint of every life form is the desire to create like the Creator, just as within every child born of a human parent are the potentialities, hopes, and desires of the parents. Every spark of divinity, as it experienced the various physical embodiments and species, was also developing its desire to become a creator. The infinite creator made a decision a long time ago in earthly terms to place no limits on what could be created by its fledgling children. This was known as the law of free will, and this law has been the source of all pain and misery upon your world and countless others. The Creator gave each one of you the ability to create, unlike the perfect blueprint. Within your fourth dimensional canvas, you could paint any picture you desired, from the lovely to the grotesque. The Creator wants to experience every conceivable idea and see it manifest on the canvas of the imagination. And so it is that many of the Creator's fledgling life forms experimented with their own DNA to the point of creating misshapen, malformed, and convoluted creatures with similar convoluted mental processes. Many of the sparks of divinity, souls, who ventured into these uncharted realms became so mesmerized by their own creations that they forgot they were seventh density beings of the Creator's light and love. As they became more and more immersed in these lower densities, they became identified with the physicality and ethereality of these realms. This is referred to in your religious teachings as the original fall from grace. A popular present-day analogy on your world would be the experience of going into a movie theatre. When you are deeply engrossed in the movie, you forget about the outside world until the movie is over, and then you wander dazed and confused out of the movie theatre, slowly piecing together the reality you left just 2 hours earlier. However, in the case of your fall, the 2 hours is more like 100 million years. So, beloveds, we have two processes unfolding here. The first is the process of evolution, from a tiny spark of divinity that begins as inanimate objects of the first density and slowly evolves through more and more sophisticated levels of genetic configurations, eventually making its way back to the Godhead. Then, at the same time, we have the process of devolution, wherein souls differentiate out of the Godhead as 12th density beings of light, and gradually drop their vibration down until they reach the 7th density, wherein they take the form of luminous beings of light. It is at that point that they then differentiate further through the process of incarnation until they are able to experience all the levels of evolution, from a grain of sand to the source from whence they came. In future segments of this discussion, we will examine how evolution and devolution are intertwined and how souls possessing free will have the capabilities of entering into any level or dimension of creation and experiencing that level or levels. We will also continue with the history of your Earth, examining the civilizations that have come and gone from your world over time, and we will explore the various star races that have incarnated and invaded your world and influenced the life forms evolving on Earth. We are the founders. This is the end of part 1.